What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to the SI Sooners podcast. Parker, this season, I don't know, man, it's like been an Apollo rocket or something. We had liftoff. We had stage 1 separation after the first open date. We had stage 2 after the Texas game. And now you and me are about to go through stage 3 of the rocket boost, whatever that is, that got those guys to the moon. Our third open date of the 2020 season. I don't know about you, but after 3 straight road trips into Texas and getting home at 2 a.m. Saturday night after the Kansas game, which was at home in Norman, Oklahoma, I'm ready for an open weekend, man. How about you?
Yeah, certainly it is kind of nice not to have a game on the slate, if we're being completely honest, just based on how much we have had to do over the last few weeks. But I'll tell you what, I don't know how I feel about the bye week from the Sooners' perspective, because on the one hand, you like to have a week to rest and recuperate and get all your ducks in a row as you hit the closing stretch of the Big 12 slate. But on the other hand, hey, you're riding a really terrific wave of momentum right now, and you don't want to disrupt that even in the slightest. So we'll have to see how this factors into the way the Sooners approach Bedlam on the other side of the bye week, and whether they're still the same team, whether there's improvement, whether there's a dip in their productivity level. So that's going to be more than anything what I'm looking forward to seeing once this bye week is coming past.
100 emoji on that one. We're going to pull that one apart a little bit later. I'm John Hoover. I'm in Tulsa. That's Parker Thune in Norman. Appreciate you guys listening to the SI Sooners podcast. Appreciate you guys watching the SI Sooners podcast over on my YouTube channel. We are a Sports Illustrated affiliate network. Hey, my suggestion, guys, leave us a rating on the podcast if you like it. We'd appreciate it. If you don't, then by all means, please don't leave us a rating if you don't like it. If you like it, rate. If you don't, move along. Just kidding. Appreciate you guys listening. Okay, OU slams Kansas on Saturday night in Norman. Final score, 62-9, man. Woo! I don't know, Parker. I'm pretty disappointed. The teams kept playing after they got to 55-3. I picked that score, 55-3. Everything was lined up for 55-3. In the fourth quarter, I'm like, come on, clock. Run, clock. Just run. Dude, I picked an absolute head-kicking score, and it wasn't enough, Parker. Is that how well Oklahoma played, or is that just how terrible Kansas was?
Well, both to a certain extent, John, because Kansas didn't want to be there. I mean, let's just call it like it is. The Jayhawks didn't come in with any intention of competing, and for the most part, they didn't. Oklahoma outpaced them in every imaginable facet of the game. But to the Sooners' credit, it was clear that after some early first quarter struggles, it wasn't just the Jayhawks handing the game to them. Oklahoma put the foot on the gas and ran the Jayhawks into the ground. They scored double-digit points in every quarter, John. So it wasn't a case of this Jekyll and Hyde act that we see from Oklahoma at times, where they have a really hot quarter followed by a quarter where they don't cross the 50. It wasn't one of those kinds of things where they're streaky, they're on, then they're off. They kept the pedal to the metal no matter who was in the game, at what position. It seemed like everybody was in tune and focused on the task at hand for all 60 minutes of the game, which, granted, is easier to do against a team like Kansas, but it's an encouraging sign nonetheless for this team as we're now 7 games into the 2020 season.
No doubt, man. We're going to pull apart the OU defense now in the second segment. Okay, we really need to dive into them. Obviously, there's a ton to get to there. But right now, Parker, let's get into the Oklahoma offense. First of all, let's say this up front. Just imagine that everything we're about to say, every word is followed by the phrase, yeah, but it was against Kansas. We know it was against Kansas. Kansas is awful. Kansas is terrible. Kansas is very bad. But we got to say, Oklahoma played great. I thought they played great. Maybe not as great as Texas Tech. I had a friend tell me today, probably not as sharp. I agree with that. Probably not as sharp, obviously, the turnover and things like that. But I want to talk about the obvious first. Spencer Rattler, Mr. Tough Guy, your quarterback, right? Ran over Ricky Thomas, the Kansas safety at the goal line. First of all, I thought he slowed up a little bit, like, well, I'm not going to throw it, so I'm going to run it. And he started running it, and he kind of slowed down a little bit, like, I'm obviously going to get in, so I'm just going to look good while I'm getting in. And then Kansas safety comes up. Ricky Thomas is not a small guy. And, Spencer Rattler's like, oh, there's somebody going to challenge me at the goal line. Well, I'll show him, and lowers his shoulder. And Spencer Rattler took a big hit. Apparently on the hip. I thought it was more toward the shoulder, rib cage area, but, yeah, apparently hit pretty hard in the left hip. I don't know. Here's where I guess I'm going with this. We all know that if you analyze the post-game quotes, you listen to what Lincoln Riley said, and you listen to what obviously Spencer Rattler said, and you look at how the play unfolded, and you look at the events that unfolded after the play, which was Spencer Rattler took himself out and Lincoln Riley put him back in. And then when the game was obviously over, and all of Twitter and all of the commenters and everybody watching the game on TV was saying, "Take him out, take him out. It's 34-3. It's 41-3. Take him out." Lincoln Riley kept putting him back in there. So here's where I'm going, Parker. See if you can keep up with this. Did it look like to you, and maybe I'm reaching on this, but did it maybe sound like after the game that perhaps Lincoln Riley put him back out there for 2 drives after halftime, kind of left him out there a little bit, like a pitcher that's getting roughed up a little bit. You leave him out there to eat some more innings up. And it looked to me, and maybe that's what I'm asking you, did it look to you like Lincoln used that as a teaching moment? Because the way he phrased it after the game, he said something like, "Once I knew he was fine." In other words, once I knew it wasn't a serious injury, but just a bruise. Sure, I'm sure it hurt. I'm sure it was sore, but I'm going to make him stay out there and become kind of that leader. Okay? I mean, Ramondre Stevenson said after the game, "I didn't know Spencer was going to lay it all on the line for us like that." That says a lot. Lincoln Riley, for instance, loves tough quarterbacks, obviously. And I think he maybe saw that as a chance to let Spencer Rattler, for the first time, show his guys, Parker, how tough he can be.
Well, this is kind of where I am not following Riley's rationale here, John, is the fact that Rattler took himself out of the game, right? So it's not as if Rattler's banged up, but he's as competitive as they come, and he's dying to stay out there on the field, and he's going to talk his head coach into letting him go back out and take the snaps. Because in a situation like that, I understand why a guy like Lincoln Riley would say, "Okay, you know what? You want to step on their throats? You want to put another couple touchdowns on the board before you call it a day? Great, go back out there." But the fact that Rattler took himself out of the game, thereby indicating that this issue, whatever it was, bruise, hip pointer, whatever the issue was actually significantly hobbling him. And he didn't feel comfortable going out there and throwing the football and running the offense. And then the fact that Riley, in spite of that, sent him back out, to me it's just a massive question mark. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know what Riley's rationale there is. And if it is to show the rest of the team that Rattler can tough it out, then how genuine, how legitimate is that, John? Because it's not Rattler putting his own toughness on display, right? It's Riley compelling him to prove that he's tough. Rattler doesn't want to be out there. If he did, he wouldn't have taken himself out of the game. So it's just a very strange situation all the way around. And I understand where Rattler's coming from, right? You're hurting. You're up big against a team that you know you're going to beat and you know has no chance of competing with you. And to be honest, you're the straw that stirs the drink in the Oklahoma offense. You don't want to put yourself in danger of missing multiple games down the road should you aggravate that injury. So, to me, I get Rattler's side of this a lot more than I get Riley's. And I really am curious, and hopefully we get a chance to follow up with Coach Riley on this, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me that Riley sent Rattler back out there. Because like I said, all things considered, he probably shouldn't have been in the game at that point anyway, given that he was already banged up and given that the Sooners had a comfortable lead, but especially to send him back in after he took himself out. I've never seen anything quite like that from a football coach, John. I really haven't. Yeah. I'm really trying to dig through my memory of all the football games that I've watched over my years on this earth, and I've never witnessed a situation like that. I haven't.
You make some good points. What I would add is that Rattler's not had a chance yet to prove how tough he is. Where it gets interesting to me is that he was clearly not right. He was not, he was experiencing pain in his hip when he would plant and step and throw the ball forward, and the ball wasn't zipping out. It wasn't accurate. Some of them were hitting the ground. that's where it pays diminishing returns, if anything, to me, is that, hey, he's not the best quarterback out there. Speaking of which, I thought Tanner Mordecai came in and looked a little shook at first. That first drive went nowhere. He gets sacked. They settle for the field goal. But when Rattler did come out, I thought Tanner Mordecai came in and really acquitted himself well. I mentioned Ramondre Stevenson earlier. Speaking of Ramondre Stevenson, my gosh, 164 total yards, just 15 touches, 2 touchdowns. We had a question in last week's mailbag, remember, is he the next Marcus Dupree? To which I said, of course not. But older Sooner fans might recall Marcus's game. I can't remember exactly. I think it was Kansas State, where he carried the football like 11 times. And you go back and watch, and he never actually got tackled. Never once was he taken to the ground. They chased him out of bounds 4, 5, 6 times, whatever it was, and he scored like 4 touchdowns, but they never actually brought him to the ground. And I said, of course, last week, no way, there's only one Marcus Dupree, right? I said that. It was on record, and I still say that. But Parker, Ramondre's game against Kansas on Saturday night reminded me of that a little bit. He did get tackled, but certainly never by the first guy. Not once, I don't think.
Yeah, John, I was, of course, up on the photo deck for that game shooting highlights, and I was looking through all the highlights that I shot earlier today, and I didn't get quite every play. I think there were maybe 6, 7 plays throughout the game that I missed for one reason or another on the tape. But I watched every single one of Ramondre Stevenson's carries that I had on tape. And on every single one of those plays, he made the first tackler miss. Every single one, John. There was not a single time in this game, to my knowledge, based on what I have documented on film, that the first man to hit Ramondre Stevenson brought him down. That's remarkable. It really is. And I don't care who you're playing. I don't care what the level of competition is. I don't care how good people think you are or what comparisons you're drawing. To touch the ball 15 times and never to be brought down by the first man who makes contact with you, that is special, John, and Ramondre Stevenson is special, and we're beginning to see that a lot more now that he's the clear-cut lead back in this backfield. And we saw it in spurts last year, but there was only so much he could do behind that Trey Sermon, Kennedy Brooks law firm. And he got 64 carries all of last year. He's going to get plenty more than 64 carries over the next 3 weeks, I would venture to guess, if he continues to do what he's done with as many touches as he did, especially this last Saturday against Kansas. 15 touches, 164 total yards, and 2 trips to the end zone.
I said it before. I think he's the best player on the offense. I think he's the most physically gifted player on the offense. He takes the place, I think, in the pecking order of T.J. Pledger. T.J. Pledger on Saturday night looked good, ran hard. I think he ran harder than usual even, which is saying something. What do you think of Jaden Hazelwood, and what do you think his long-term boost is to this offense for this year?
Well, I think the goal for Hazelwood on Saturday was just to get him back up to game speed. You weren't going to roll him out there for 60, 70 snaps against Kansas because, he's been out for 6 months, and especially heading into the bye week and heading into a big matchup with Oklahoma State, you want a guy like him at full strength. So I don't think the goal was ever to get him 60 or 70 snaps or to get him 10 or 12 targets. The goal was just to get him running some routes, target him a couple times, work him back into the offense. He had 1 catch for 33 yards, I think on 3 targets, if my memory serves me correctly. So, I think he's a guy that, especially when you look at what he brings to the table physically, he's going to be one of the best assets that Spencer Rattler has in the passing game. It's just a matter of how quickly he can become acclimated to an offense that has already functioned at quite a high level without him. So it's on him to reinsert himself into the picture and find his niche, because the way that this Sooner offense is firing on all cylinders, he doesn't need to be there, quite honestly. And sure, his presence is a huge boost, but the way that Riley set up his offense over the first 7 games of the season didn't take into account that Hazelwood was going to be rejoining the team. At least that's not what it seems like. You got a guy like, you don't throw a guy like Marvin Mims out there as much as the Sooners have if you're counting on Hazelwood coming back and being the guy in the offense. So the Sooners have a multitude of weapons, a multitude of guys that can contribute in the passing game for Rattler. And so to me, Riley's spoken very highly of the way that Hazelwood handled the injury situation and continued to prepare as if he was playing every single week. So I'll be interested to see how that manifests itself with a full game's workload for Hazelwood out wide, and I think we'll see that to a certain degree against Oklahoma State.
And I know your biggest concern right now is for the knees of Austin Stogner. I made a mental note of that. I'm disappointed in myself. Be sure and ask Lincoln Riley about Austin Stogner and the hit and the prognosis and all that. I just forgot. Like everyone else did, apparently, I forgot. Feel bad. I should have asked. I'm not sure he would have given us much of an answer, but I wish we'd asked. Either way, the Sooners have an open date, a bye week, whatever you want to call it, before they host Oklahoma State. You think we see Stogner on the field on November 21st?
I think you do, John. You got to bye, like we said. Gives him some extra time and extra space to recover. And, it wouldn't be shocking to me if they held him out of action, especially because it looks like right now Braden Willis is going to come back for that Oklahoma State game. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind is the Sooners are adding another big piece to that H-back position. And Jeremiah Hall has been fantastic, and Mikey Henderson is really emerging as one of the future stars in this Oklahoma offense. So there's not going to be any need to play Stogner. I think if there's any question as to his ability to function at 100% on the football field, but he'd certainly be nice to have going up against a team in Oklahoma State that can put some points on the board if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you need to find some mismatches against that Oklahoma State defense, which we'll talk about coming up in the final segment. Listen, Hazelwood keeps coming on. Marvin Mims is obviously the man. Theo Weiss is making strides, I think, is becoming an elite receiver, although he dropped another touchdown. That's certainly not good. I thought Drake Stoops really showed some value the other night. He was good. But, man, Parker, like late in the third quarter, early in the fourth, I looked at the stats. Charleston Rambo was on the stat line with 0 catches. I'm like, wait a minute, 0 catches? Why is he on the – oh, because Spencer Rattler kept trying to get him involved. He had at one point 5 targets and 0 catches. This is a guy that was supposed to be your alpha receiver this year, Parker, and he – to me, right now, is really struggling to make a competitive catch.
Well, I'll tell you what, John, after watching the tape, I do think that Charleston Rambo's final stat line, 2 catches for 20 yards, isn't quite indicative of how well he played on Saturday. I don't feel like Charleston Rambo has been shuffled out of this Oklahoma passing attack by any means. He was targeted several times. He did get some pretty bad balls thrown his way and wasn't put in a position, I don't believe, to have as much of an impact as he could have had. And we forget, he had a late touchdown that was wiped out by a penalty. So the contributions are there. The opportunities are there for Rambo. It just hasn't all come together, I think, the way a lot of people expected. But fortunately, and I know I touched on this earlier, I'll say it again, though, Charleston Rambo doesn't need to be a guy that gets you 100, 150 yards and a couple touchdowns a game for this Oklahoma offense to play at a very high and very efficient level. So he's going to be more of a luxury piece than anything right now. I don't think that he's currently the primary weapon in the passing game for Spencer Rattler the way a lot of people expected he was going to be heading into the season. But he's very much still a dangerous deep threat and a guy that can stretch the field. And if nothing else, he's creating opportunities for other players by drawing tight coverage from usually the opponent's best defender.
Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, the real stars of last night, the Oklahoma defense. Trade Pros Heat and Air in Oklahoma City. Whether you just need service or a mini split for your home office, studio, or man cave, or if you're finally ready to upgrade to a more efficient train system for your entire home, get a free estimate from Trade Pros for all your heating and air needs. Trade Pros earned a Best of 2020 award from Home Advisor and has nothing but 5-star reviews on Google. Go to TradeProsOKC.com or call 405-675-0176 or just book your appointment on Facebook. Trade Pros, that's one word, Trade Pros Heat and Air. Follow SI Sooners on Twitter at all_Sooners. Find Parker at Parker Thune. I'm at John E. Hoover. Our website, allsooners.com. The first 2 months of this season, that's right. We've been either number 1 or number 2 on the entire Sports Illustrated College network. Seriously, folks, we're playing for a natty here. We're like number 2 this week. So, not this week, this month. What am I saying? So, Bama, here we come. We want Bama. That's the way we're going to say it. Anyway, it's all free. No memberships, no subscriptions, no credit cards. Check out the video version of this here podcast over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. Parker, the OU offense last night was great. 540 total yards, 31 first downs, 8.1 yards per play, but blah. The OU defense was the star of last night's game. We could go through every position. Hey, we probably will. Who knows? It's a podcast. We're allowed to do that. But, man, 9 quarterback sacks, held Kansas to 3 of 19 on third down, 11 tackles for loss. They basically chased poor Jalen Daniels into his nightmares last night and then ultimately just beat him into oblivion, Parker.
Yeah, my goodness. The hit that Isaiah Thomas put on Jalen Daniels for sack number 9 in the fourth quarter, I felt so bad for the kid. A freshman playing behind a real shoddy offensive line, going up against one of the most fearsome defensive lines I would posit in the entire country right now when you think about who they're lining up in Isaiah Thomas, Perrion Winfrey, Nick Bonito, and Ronnie Perkins. I mean, that was a mismatch from the get-go, and Daniels was under duress all game long. And I tell you what, 9 sacks, John, 9 sacks is a lot of sacks. And we saw the Sooners record 9 sacks last season against Texas in the Red River Showdown, which was eventually a 34-27 victory. But I can't remember a time before that the Sooners racked up 9 sacks in a conference game. I mean, my goodness, these guys are overpowering right now, absolutely overwhelming. And I get that, okay, they were playing Kansas, sure. But when you got multiple guys in the backfield on every single play, and we've seen it several weeks in a row now. You think back to the Texas Tech game, the TCU game, guys applying pressure constantly. I tell you what, this defense's success over the last 3 games of the regular season is going to be heavily predicated on how the Sooners play up front. Because right now, that has set the tone over the last 3 games for some really, really impressive overall effort on the defensive side of the football. And if they can keep that up, nobody's going to touch this team, John.
Yeah, tied to school record, actually, with 9 sacks. And like you said, the D-line was just unreal. I asked Alex Grinch last night, how much does having Ronnie Perkins back help the overall pass rush? You know, single blocking for other guys and all that. He gave me a big, huge, long, drawn-out answer about schemes and overloading and playing half a field and cutting the field in half. And basically, I came back and asked a follow-up, and I boiled it down. I said, no. How does having Ronnie Perkins back help motivate and inspire the guys around him? And he gave me a great answer. He said basically among the things he said was guys like Nick Bonito with his 3 quarterback sacks had darn well better thank Ronnie Perkins. He said Perkins raises everyone else's level of play with his energy and his intensity and his effort. Here's what he said. He said, this is what elite D-line play looks like up here. I need to be at that level and not down here at the level I'm at. He was using that illustration with his hands, and you saw that last night from guys like Reggie Grimes, Marcus Stripling, Corey Roberson, all those young guys. Moving forward, Parker, that's absolutely huge for this defense.
Yes, certainly, and you think about what a benefit Perkins has been and what an impact he's had in just 2 games since he's been back from the suspension. Look, we knew that Nick Bonito was already one of the top pass rushers in the country, but he was darn near unblockable on Saturday against Kansas, and a lot of that was due to the fact that you got Ronnie Perkins planted on the other end, just bearing down on the quarterback every single snap, and when you have to pay so much attention to that guy, how much attention can you pay to the guy on the other side? And so not only is Ronnie Perkins a difference maker in the sense that he, as an individual, can get after the quarterback with great regularity, he's a difference maker in the sense that he's automatically going to draw the best assignment more than anything else from the offensive line. They're going to match their best guy up with Ronnie Perkins, and if they need to double team him, they're going to double team him. But you got Bonito coming off the other side, you guarantee that he's going to have one-on-one more times than not, and generally a guy like Nick Bonito is going to win that one-on-one battle with an offensive tackle. And so, I mean, you throw in 2 guys that are phenomenal pass rushers for interior linemen in Thomas and Winfrey, and there's really no containing this Oklahoma defensive line. And you think about how over the course of their first 2 games in conference play, they only had 2 sacks, one against Kansas State, one against Iowa State. Now they had 6 against Texas. They had 3 against TCU. Or no, I'm sorry, 6 against TCU, 3 against Texas Tech, and now 9 against Kansas. So clearly there's been a step up. There's been some definite progress made, and that's not all on the shoulders of Ronnie Perkins, but it's due in large part to his presence right now.
I think they're up to, in the last 4 games, including Texas, they're up to 40 tackles for loss as a team, which is ridiculous. The linebackers last night, I thought they were good. Not maybe elite, other than Bonito, who's more of a defensive end anyway. But Asamoah was good. David Agwebu was really good. So good, in fact, I think that he stepped in made his first start of the year at middle linebacker for Deshaun White, who Grinch said was banged up from the week before. Remember, he got whacked on the knee at Texas Tech, but he wasn't so banged up that he couldn't come in and get 2 tackles. It sounded like he might have just missed some time at practice. And Guebu, man, he just kicked the door open. I think he's that good. He's come on that fast. In addition to the linebackers, Parker, I thought the secondary against Kansas, again, I know it's Kansas, but I got to say it, the secondary, wow. How about that performance last night?
I tell you what, John, when I looked over the film, one guy that really stood out to me was DJ Graham, who made a couple of very impressive open field tackles. That guy's a true freshman, and that gives you some hope for where this secondary is headed under the Alex Grinch regime. I mean, but you talk about the regulars. I mean, Trey Brown got his second interception of the season. Brendan Radley-Hiles, for as much crap as I and many other pundits have given him, he did have an interception. He then fumbled, but hey, you know what? We got to take the good with the bad with a guy like Buki Radley-Hiles. Yep. But you're seeing a lot of guys come on strong. Woody Washington right at the top of that list. And much like the defensive line, I think you've seen a marked improvement, John. And I think a lot of it goes back to the Texas game. I think a lot of these players really grew up in the Texas game. If you look at how different the Sooners have been as a team, but especially on the defensive side of the football, since before that Texas game, and for the most part during that game, and then since, in the 3 games since, how much of an improvement we've seen all the way around. And again, they haven't played juggernauts, right? It's been TCU, Texas Tech, and Kansas. All 3 of those teams, in any other year, wouldn't even be in bowl contention. But at the same time, you got to give credit to the Sooners for stepping up in a big way as a team. And it's clear when you watch the tape, this isn't just due to the fact that they're playing inferior opponents. They have made noticeable improvements in really every level of the defense. And you talk about the defensive line, the linebackers, the secondary, all 3 of those groups. It's been night and day different since that Texas game. And so it makes me wonder if that was the turning point in Oklahoma's season.
Well, you're 100% right. 3 weeks in a row, remember, they got a big lead, played great for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, whatever it was, and then collapsed either in the fourth quarter or second half. Well, they ended up making plays late in the game. Remember the interception in the end zone, and then by Woody Washington, they end up with another interception in the end zone. Sam Ehlinger threw 2 picks in the end zone. That does wonders for your confidence, I would think. And I think, gutting that game out and winning ultimately in the Cotton Bowl, and coupled with the confidence that comes out of that scenario, along with like you said, TCU's not very good, Texas Tech isn't any good at all, and Kansas is obviously obliviously bad. Those 3 things that come together. And I think you're starting to see an Oklahoma defense. And listen, this Oklahoma defense is a little bit shell-shocked this season. They've got reason to tuck their tail between their legs, but that's where you get impressed, is by the amount of work that they've done, the amount of progress that they've made. They're playing I'll say it this way, they're playing to a different standard than what they did in the first few weeks. And the secondary has been beaten by worse teams than Kansas, all right? Missouri State, had a couple of plays. Kansas State's not supposed to be chucking deep balls like that on OU, making it look effortless. And they did. And you saw busted plays, missed tackles, crazy coverages against Iowa State and Texas. And you look at last night, the standard that Kansas couldn't reach. Their only touchdown of the game, last play of the game, came against a bunch of freshmen and walk-ons. So otherwise, this OU defense goes through a Big 12 game, giving up just 3 points against Kansas. I know, again, against Kansas. But I thought it was amazing performance by the defense, including the DBs. Trey Brown, as you mentioned, Buki had that. I mean, poor Buki, gave it right back. Only Buki could fumble the ball on an interception, fumble it back to a team like Kansas, inches to go on the sideline, punched out by a guy who stepped out of bounds first. That could only happen to poor Buki Radley-Hiles. But I thought he played good last night. I thought he played one of his best games of the year, obviously, again, against Kansas. But That kind of play could only happen to him. Woody Washington started again at corner. Wasn't a one-time thing. Wasn't a fluke. I was starting to think he's taken Jaden Davis's spot. Trey Norwood came in, made more plays. He can be trusted now, I think, a little bit more than before. And it was good to see for the development of the program, the development of that position, Parker, was good to see all those freshmen come in. Speaking of freshmen, what did you think of Shane Witter and Brendan Walker getting in as early as they did? Again, against Kansas, but those guys seem to have earned their stripes a little bit.
Absolutely, and Witter made a really big fourth down stop, if you recall, in that second quarter when Kansas decided to roll the dice on fourth and short in their own territory, and Witter was the one that denied Jalen Daniels the line to gain. And yeah, Brendan Walker, I think it was scored as a half sack, actually, but was in the backfield and had a shot at his first sack as a Sooner. I think he ended up splitting that one with Jordan Kelly, if I remember correctly. But it's great to see these young guys getting some action, especially in early game situations. It's not just in garbage time that they're playing. And I think one of the things that was interesting for me to see on Saturday, John, was that it wasn't the first team, then the second team, then the third team. Alex Grinch mixed and matched his personnel from a very early point in the game. You saw Reggie Grimes, for instance, getting snaps in the first quarter. So he was rotating guys in really early on. And that goes back to what he had told us in the Sooners' second bye week of the year when he said, hey, we're getting to a point where we're going to be able to rotate. And that's something we really want to do. And it's something that's going to make us better as a defense. And so that gives me some hope that Alex Grinch finally has this defense where he wants them. And he has all his personnel. He's got, as a coach, you want to have some type of idea as to when and where you can deploy all your viable personnel. And I think he's finally in a situation where he knows what he's operating with and he knows what each of these guys brings to the table and what kind of situation they'd be best suited for. So that gives me a lot of hope that Oklahoma's defense, as you start to look ahead to the next 3 games, the final 3 games of the regular season, maybe a Big 12 championship game, and then the bowl game, it really gives me hope that this strong play is a trend and not just a blip on the radar.
I'll be eager to see how much this team improves this week in the open date because the 3 teams they got coming up, starting with Oklahoma State, obviously, hitting the road for West Virginia, those are, I don't know how good Baylor is. I don't think they're very good. But, we'll see. But that's not an easy finishing stretch, especially when you come back from an open date with Oklahoma State, top-ranked team in the Big 12. Up next on the SI Sooners podcast, we are going to talk about Oklahoma State and then the rest of the Big 12. But first, what's on deck for this week's open date?
Hey there, loyal listeners. Parker Thune here with SI Sooners. Are you a business owner looking to get your product out there to the masses? Let's say you run a hotel in Norman, or a car dealership in Oklahoma City, or a restaurant in Edmond, or maybe you're just a small online business who creates and sells OU merchandise, and you want Sooner Nation to come sample your wares. Consider advertising in this space right here on the SI Sooners podcast. SI Sooners reaches thousands of readers, viewers, and listeners literally every day, and the SI Sooners podcast is the ideal place to find your next customer. To advertise, send an email to allsoonersi@gmail.com or send us a direct message on Twitter at @all_Sooners.
Final segment of the SI Sooners podcast. Sooners have an open date this week, so they're not going to lose. We know that. I don't know if this is a great time for it, as Parker mentioned in the first segment. I mean, this team, listen, they're playing great right now. I thought they showed some improvement in some more areas last night, offensive line, defensive line, secondary. We've talked about that, but it is what it is. As Bob Stoops used to say, as Lincoln Riley has said, the open date is the open date, bye week, whatever you want to call it. And so there it is, Parker. What do you think this team needs to focus on now moving ahead? We've seen, like I said, lots of improvement, really kind of across the board. I can't think of a position where you look at one guy or one position and you look back on their performances this year and say, they're still not very good. They haven't really done much. No, I think everybody and every position has improved. Maybe I'm looking at it through some certain colored glasses. I don't know. But what do you think? You think they've got enough work to do, enough places to do some work in this open date, for the finishing stretch that's coming up?
Well, here's the thing, John. You may not know what kind of tinted glasses you're looking at this all through, but I guarantee you that Gerald and all the YouTube trolls will let you know as soon as this episode's posted. So we'll get some clarity there. But no, in terms of what this team needs to improve on, it's really hard to pick one thing out. I feel like after the Missouri State game when they had the bye, and then when they had the bye in October, it was really easy to point at a few things that the Sooners needed to drastically improve on or needed to make the focus in the open date. And you really can't point to anything. I mean, the most concerning storylines, if you think about the last 2 weeks, the most concerning storyline coming out of Lubbock was that Gabe Burkich had just become the first Sooner since 2001 to miss field goals in 4 straight games. The most concerning storyline coming out of last night's game was the fact that Spencer Rattler's banged up. And so to me, here's what the Sooners need to do. I think the question marks about keeping the intensity up for 60 minutes, keeping the pedal to the metal, as Alex Grinch put it, I think those, we're getting close to a point where we can lay those to rest. I don't want to say it's completely a thing of the past, but the Sooners are definitely headed in the right direction there. And so I think the focus should just be getting your guys healthy. Right, you got Spencer Rattler banged up. You got Austin Stogner banged up. Deshaun White's banged up. You got a lot of guys that are playing with some degree of ailment. And you got Braden Willis, who's going to be coming back from an injury, presumably LaRon Stokes coming back from an injury against Oklahoma State. Obi Obialo, I'm curious to know what the deal is with him there, because we've only seen him in 2 games thus far this season, and he's barely made much of an impact. He was a guy that was penciled in as a starter heading into the year at that X position, and we just haven't seen much of him. And so, to me, I really want to see Oklahoma come out of the bye week at full strength, as close to full health as they can muster, and see what this team can do when they've got all their personnel at their disposal against a really solid opponent in Oklahoma State. It's finally going to resemble the Sooner football of old, I think, when Oklahoma takes on the Pokes in Norman on November 21st, because there aren't going to be any more guys sitting out because of suspensions. There aren't going to be as many guys you would hope sitting out in the COVID-19 protocol. You're going to have a really good Oklahoma team on one sideline and a really good Oklahoma State team on the other sideline, and neither of those teams are going to have any excuses. And that, essentially, at this point, amounts to a play-in game for the Big 12 championship. So there's a lot at stake for Oklahoma in that game. And so to me, you got to play these last 3 games as if you have no excuses. It's pretty much all out there on the table for Oklahoma at this point. I know they don't technically control their own destiny, but in effect, they control their own destiny. If they win their last 3 games, they're going to be playing in Jerry's World next month in the Big 12 championship and for a shot at a 6th straight conference title. So you got to go and take it now. If you're the Sooners, it's on you to go and make it happen.
Yeah, I think you've seen a young team grow up. I think you've seen, especially like we talked about that Texas game, you've seen guys understand maybe what their role is, what the expectations of their position is, learning how to play college football. And then you've seen them challenged a little bit and kind of succeed, have some success at the end of games, like you said. So they're growing through some of those growing pains. But yeah, man, Bedlam, 2 weeks should be fun. Oklahoma climbed to number 18 in this week's rankings. 1 spot. You win 62-9, and you climb 1 spot. That tells me that everybody knows Kansas is just, well, they're winless. So that tells you everything you need to know. Oklahoma State stayed at number 14. Cowboys nearly lost their 2nd in a row, but they got up to Manhattan, and they hold on. 20-18 was that score. Texas hangs on to beat West Virginia, scores late, and hangs on to beat West Virginia 17-13. So, you see the trend here? TCU kicked the crap out of Texas Tech, 34-18. Kansas scored 9, so that's how many teams is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams in the Big 12 that scored less than 20 this week. Iowa State comes back to beat Baylor 38-31. Yeah, man, it's like in the Big 12, it's like, where did all the offense go? Or where did these defenses come from? Parker, what did you make of the Big 12 this weekend?
John, it's just utter chaos. I don't know what to think about this conference. No one seems like they want to go and win it. And right now, Oklahoma is undoubtedly the team that nobody wants to play. But Oklahoma State, to have as much trouble as they did putting away a Kansas State team that's operating without its most dangerous offensive and special teams weapon in Joshua Youngblood and its starting quarterback in Skylar Thompson. I mean, this Pokes team headed into the year with legitimate Big 12 championship aspirations and, in some people's minds, college football playoff aspirations. Then you got Iowa State, whom, I mean, they looked like the best team in the Big 12, no questions asked. Probably up until this week when they got all they could handle from a Baylor team that is quite simply not good. And it's just so indicative. I mean, it's so 2020, John. That's really what it amounts to. This has been the year of the unpredictable in college football. Right now, after Clemson lost to Notre Dame, I mean, who saw that coming? That was the kind of game that Notre Dame always loses, and that was the kind of game that Clemson, they're the kind of team that always wins those type of contests, it seems like. But think about the fact that right now, the longest winning streak in the nation, John, belongs to Hugh Freeze and Liberty, who have won 9 straight games. I
thought it was Notre Dame at 12.
Have they won 12 in a row?
I thought that's what I'd seen.
Perhaps. I might need a fact check on that.
I have to look that one up.
Yeah, but no, the reality is that tells you everything you need to know about college football in 2020.
Absolutely.
It is madness across the entire country, not just in the Big 12, but the Big 12 is certainly a microcosm of that.
You nailed it. Now, Parker, I got to say on Oklahoma State, of all the defenses I've seen this year, I got to say I've been impressed with Oklahoma State's as much as anybody, and Tulsa's. Tulsa's defense is seriously good. It'd be good if Tulsa could actually get a game in at some point. They had another one canceled this past week. But, man, Oklahoma State's playing some really good defense. Yesterday, they end the game by intercepting Will Howard. K-State had gotten in the red zone twice, I think, in the first half, and they only came away with 2 field goals. And then they turned in, obviously, the play of the day. Israel Entwine strips the ball from Howard, and Jason Taylor runs it back 85 yards for a touchdown in what turned out to be a 2-point game. On a day when Oklahoma State didn't have Tylan Wallace, Chuba Hubbard wasn't himself, and then he got hurt. I think L.D. Brown was supposed to be held out, but he ended up played well. Mike Gundy said they limped through practice, didn't have a good week of work. He said after the game, he said, we were pretty beat up. Even without one of their best players on defense, Parker, Colby Harvell-Peel, the Oklahoma State defense won the day. This is just, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. I think this is just the kind of defense that is equipped to come into Norman in 2 weeks and pull off an upset in a couple. And yes, by the way, I know the rankings say one thing, but Vegas is going to tell us that Oklahoma will be favored in that game, so it will be an upset if Oklahoma State wins. So my terminology was not wrong there. But OSU's defense is experienced. They're athletic. They're aggressive. They make game-changing plays. And now in Jim Knowles' third year, I think they really look like they've gotten things figured out, Parker.
John, they put Shane Illingworth at quarterback, and you got a contender. I'm just saying. Hey, Spencer Sanders has been erratic over the last few games, and I think it's pretty clear at this point in time that offense is only going to go as far as he goes. And so if he has a good game against Oklahoma, then I think you got a ball game on your hands. But if Oklahoma can create takeaways the way that they have the last couple of weeks, they had 3 takeaways against Texas Tech and 2 more against Kansas. If that trend continues and they force Oklahoma State to commit turnovers, it's going to be a bloodbath in Norman. And I think Oklahoma State's chances in this game lie in their ability to establish the run with Chuba Hubbard against a very strong Oklahoma front 4. And let's be clear here. Oklahoma State does not have a good offensive line. That's one of their major shortcomings. And so Oklahoma is going to have the definite advantage in the trenches, and that's something that Oklahoma State's going to need to overcome. That's something that Chuba Hubbard is going to have to be mindful of as he game plans for this contest. So to me, Oklahoma has the advantage in some very key matchups across the field. The X factor is Tylan Wallace. If he's healthy, he's the best receiver in college football. And if Spencer Sanders or Shane Illingworth can get him the ball, then I think Oklahoma State can get to a point where they can put some points on the board and engage Oklahoma in a shootout. And you mentioned the defense. They do have a very strong defense, especially in the secondary. Colby Harvell-Peel's health is going to be of preeminent concern heading into the game in Norman against Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. But Oklahoma State certainly has the pieces. It just hasn't come together yet. And I'm wondering what's missing. And there's no easy answer right now. It could just be that they're banged up. But you're gonna have a game on your hands in Norman in a couple weeks, John. I don't think either of these teams is gonna lay down and die. We're not gonna see the type of Bedlam blowouts that we've seen in the past. I think Oklahoma State is gonna come to town with the intent to establish that they are the better football team in the state of Oklahoma this year. Is that the case? We'll have to see how it plays out.
Leave it to our good friend Dean Blevins, who asked Lincoln Riley on his coach's show tonight about the health and well-being of not just Austin Stogner, but Spencer Rattler. And Lincoln Riley said tonight on the coach's show that they're fine. He expects them to play in 2 weeks against Oklahoma State. Our next podcast drops Sunday. You can listen to the SI Sooners podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcast, or on your Amazon-enabled device. Just say, Alexa, play the SI Sooners podcast, or just go to allsooners.com, click on the player, and listen right there on the web, on your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever you like. And you can always watch the video version over on my YouTube channel, John Hoover Media. For Parker Thune, I'm John Hoover. See you guys.